and welcome to the Formula Botanica Green Beauty Conversations podcast. My name's Gemma. I'm the Relationship Manager at Formula Botanica and also the host of this podcast. If you want to find out a little bit more about who we are and what we do, then please head over to formulabotanica.com and check out our free sample class. In this episode, Timi, Lorraine and I chat all about our recent experiences at In-Cosmetics Paris, looking at what had changed in the show from previous years and what our top trends were. Enjoy. So hello and a big warm welcome to the podcast, Timi and Lorraine.
Hello, thank you for having us.
Hi, Gemma. We're excited to be here.
I am thrilled that we are here as a team and that we've finally got our fabulous education manager here who is going to be sharing all of her wisdom with us today, all about In-Cosmetics. So I thought just as a brief intro, if Timi, you could introduce yourself, and then Lorraine, if you could introduce yourself before we kick off our very lively chat about In-Cosmetics.
Okay. Yep. So my name is Timi. I'm the education manager at Formula Botanica, where I work with an awesome team of tutors and project coordinators. And we look after our students on a day-to-day basis, deal with our courses, bring new developments to the school, writing exciting blog posts. So yeah, we are very busy.
Yes, you are. Very, very busy.
And I'm Lorraine. I'm the director of Formula Botanica, and I've been on the podcast a few times before, of course, and I run the school on a day-to-day basis. And I'm really excited to be here again, Gemma.
Thank you. It's been a while, Lorraine. So as everyone knows, this is a podcast about In-Cosmetics, and the three of us, Timi, Lorraine and myself, attended the recent show in Paris. And I just wanted to kick off the conversation before we go into our trends and our analysis, just to talk a little bit about, from a formulator's perspective, why In-Cosmetics is a great show to attend, Timi.
Well, I think especially this year, In-Cosmetics has been or was the place to be if you are a brand owner, a formulator, if you're thinking about starting your own business about skin or hair care. It's a great show. When I read the report about the actual show, I think there were nearly 800 different suppliers, distributors, ingredient manufacturers had stands. And people could just walk around and find out more about what they do and how they work, whether they would be a good fit for them. I also think it's a great place to bring everyone together in the industry and also to network, to make connections, and not just about finding out about innovations and new developments, but also just to meet people in the same industry and see if you can develop some new connections, new relationships.
Yeah, it was really busy.
Very busy.
Yeah, absolutely packed, 800 people. And when Timi and I were talking about this yesterday, Timi had some very good advice for people. If it's the first show that you are going to attend, what were we talking about yesterday, Timi? If you're planning on going, that you should try and prep in advance.
Exactly. That's the one. Yes. So this time, I went to the show 2 years ago and I was a bit disorganized and slightly overwhelmed because there is so much to see, so many people to visit. And then I ever mentioned the talks, the various stands about innovation, the sensory bar and so on. The best thing to do, and that's what we did this time, we really planned ahead. We wrote, the website is up and running quite early, before the actual show. I think now that they finished the Paris show, they will soon be preparing for the next year one. I think that will be in Barcelona. And the website will be up and running with a list of to-do things you can do in the show. They have separate learning sections. You can have a look at marketing trends, formulation workshops. So there's a lot to do and a lot to see. So the best thing to do is just visit the website and create some sort of a plan before you actually head to the event. The event is running for 3 days. I mean, we were there for 2 days out of the 3, and I still feel that we haven't, we couldn't do all what we wanted to do. I mean, I set out to do various things, especially in terms of formulating, but there is so much to see, and the only way you can really make the most of it if you have a plan. So plan ahead.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, just reflecting on that. So you and Lorraine went to the In Cosmetics show in London in 2017. And then Lorraine and I went to the one in Amsterdam in 2018. And then we all went to the Paris one in 2019. And I think we all agree that there were some significant changes to In Cosmetics 2019. And I just wanted to have a little talk about some of the things that you thought might have changed.
For me, the biggest change was the focus on natural and organic. The other one that I experienced firsthand is how the exhibitors want to talk to you. I mean, even back 2 years ago, we went there as Formula Botanica, as an educational establishment. We were not there to buy ingredients. We wanted to explore ingredients to see what we could include our courses, what the trend is, and what our students may be interested in. And we didn't really get a good reception as such. Some people were lovely. Some people were a bit more negative. However, this time, everybody was just great. I mean, I had great conversations with various suppliers, whether they were smaller suppliers, whether they were one of the big players, so to speak. Everybody was happy to talk to me or talk to us. Particularly one that I still remember is one of the ingredient suppliers. I had a chat with them because we use one of their ingredients in our courses. So I wanted to find out a bit more about their usage. So I needed a bit of technical help. And we had an excellent conversation, and they were just so keen to help. When I told them who we are and what we do, what the plan is, they were very happy to help. And I actually figured out where I went wrong with that particular ingredient. So that was just great. So for me, these were the two biggest differences.
Yeah. I mean, they had the Indie Beauty Trail.
They did. That was the first brochure that ran out. I think we got there not that late, and already that part, you just couldn't get it. And I was very lucky to have the Indie Beauty Trail map from one of the Formula Botanica students. She picked up two, so she gave me her spare one. So that helped.
And like you said, there was a way more of a focus on naturals and organics. And I was wondering, Lorraine, if you could just have a little talk, because you actually gave a presentation on the second day in the marketing trend tent all about naturals. So if you could just, explain to people who didn't get to attend and didn't get to see that talk, it was packed. It was absolutely packed.
Yeah, it was. It was so exciting. So it's been a huge honour to be invited to speak at In Cosmetics, because you don't just turn up and get invited. You have to be vetted by a panel. You have to be put forward. It's a really, really big deal. So the fact that Formula Botanica and I was invited to come and speak there is massive for us. And so I really wanted to talk about naturals in the more philosophical sense of the industry, and the fact that we need to start changing the conversation around naturals and synthetics. So that was the main crux of my talk. It was called Challenging the Assumptions of Naturals in Cosmetics. So I talked really about the fact that, we've got to this stage that there's been this battle in the industry for years now. Some people are saying synthetics are better. Some people are saying naturals are better. Even in the run up to In Cosmetics for my talk, I was asked a couple of times by journalists, why are naturals better? Because there's constantly this assumption that you have to pit one against the other. So my talk was all about the fact that we need to move beyond that and start to talk about sustainability in the truest sense of the word, actually managing our environmental footprints, doing the right thing by the communities around where ingredients are grown, the stakeholders involved in the industry, and still obviously making a profit, because it's such an amazing industry. But that doesn't mean that we can't look after our footprints. So that was the main topic that I wanted to talk about. And as you say, people were queuing to get in. Not everyone could fit in. I think there were about 250 people there in total. And it was just super exciting and quite nerve-wracking, actually. It was the biggest audience I'd ever spoken to. So I loved it. And hopefully we'll be invited back in the future. Hint, hint, if anyone's listening.
So before we start talking about the trends that we spotted, I just wanted Timi to talk about some of the workshops that you went to, because I think you said when we were talking yesterday that those workshops haven't always been super accessible, but that's changed again. So I think you said you could get 2 per participant.
I believe so. I think that was the limit as far as I'm aware. So through all the 3 days, I had some formulation workshops in the lab section. And again, you could find out information about them beforehand, and you could put your name forward, and they let you know before the event whether you got accepted or not. And I was lucky. I got accepted for 2 of them, which I was really interested in, and so I was obviously very happy about them. Both workshops, formulation workshops, were about new emulsifiers by different companies, and they were amazing. The first one was particularly great because it turned out that we had one whole formulation table just for the Formula Botanica team, as in Formula Botanica students, because it turned out many of our students decided to go to these workshops. So yeah, we occupied one whole table. We've got some great photos. Hopefully we can show them to you later on. And yeah, we worked with a new emulsifier, which was brilliant because you could use the same emulsifier to get to quite different products. So you could create one emulsion, which is more like a mist, like a sprayable milk, but also with the same emulsifier, you could create a rich cream, which had nearly 70% oil phase. And it's a very, very different texture and very different skin feel. And it's just amazing from a formulator's point of view that you could just create so different product with one ingredient, one main ingredient as such. So yeah, that was the first workshop. I'm sure the students will have a lot more to say about that. And the second workshop, again, was about another emulsifier. Again, fantastic and absolutely brilliant. All natural Cosmos certified. They also paid attention to niches. So they are accepted by vegan niches or even those formulators who focus on halal skincare products. So yeah, it was really exciting.
Sounds really interesting. I know that a lot of our students, reported back that they had great times at those workshops as well.
The funny part was that after the workshop, everybody the Formula Botanica team decided to ambush the suppliers. So we went to their stand and they were just really great. They were so happy to help us so we could ask for some samples.
Oh, nice. So
we could do maybe some blog posts in the future, who knows?
Yeah.
But yeah, they were really great. They helped us.
Yeah, good. I'm glad. Let's kick off then with our trends. And I think moving on from what Timi was saying about formulations and the type of things that you can make, the first trend that we tended to spot was this desire for products with a jelly-like texture. So I'd seen it at the professional beauty show as well that I attended in February. There were so many products with jelly cleansers and jelly-like textures that don't kind of tend to move around. So I know that sounds, maybe I haven't explained that very well, but when you put it into your hand, like a cleanser, for instance, it doesn't sort of spill all over the way. It comes out in a little blob, and then you can then apply it to your skin really easily. And I think that we saw quite a lot of those in the innovation zone.
That was one of the main things I spotted as well, the jelly-like textures. You could see all sorts, not just the jellies that we would understand as jelly, but also gel creams, or you had jelly to cream textures or gel to powder. That was really interesting. It was one of the makeup products that they displayed. I think it was an eyeshadow.
Yes.
And it had this texture that it was a gel, but when you apply it, it becomes like a powdery substance. It's great to apply when you use makeup. So jellies were the hit again. Yeah. And I think you guys said that last year as well, this was one of the bigger trends. So I think they continued from then on. This year.
Yeah, we saw it quite a bit last year, didn't we? Where we saw particularly in the formulation area where they had big pots of gels and particles suspended in gels. So it's good to see that continuing.
Yeah, there was definitely products that had particles suspended in them again. And I think we've moved away slightly from glitter. Like it was quite glittery last year. Lorraine and I, in that podcast we recorded, if you go and listen to it, we talked about this kind of unicorn trend where there was lots of glitter. But this time I felt people were focusing on more sustainable things that could be suspended within the jelly. So there was these little charcoal spheres, and these gels with things in them could be made into a face mask. So this specific one had this, so it was a gel with these little charcoal spheres, and you could use it as an anti-pollution face mask, which was really interesting. And I was telling Timi yesterday about this illuminator I found. So again, it was a makeup, and it was like a jelly illuminator. So it was like a pot that you could use, and you could just poke your finger into it and obviously get a small amount, which is great for an illuminator, but it kind of bounced back. It was springy. And I said to Timi, I was there ages poking it, going, boom, look, it bounces back. It's just, this is a really interesting product to use.
I think we had the same in the sensory bar, didn't we, Timi? Where we found one of those little, it was like a sponge-like jelly thing, and we kept squeezing it. I think, in fact, we even filmed a video of me doing it, didn't you?
Yeah, I'm not even sure. It was something cloud. It had a great name as well, but yeah, it was springy. Yeah, we've got a short video.
Yeah,
maybe we'll include it in the show note podcast blog write up.
Yeah, so I mean, those products I find interesting because they provide. They're interesting to use. They provide another dimension to the product. So it's not just, putting something on your hand and slapping it on your face. Like Timi was saying, you can go a gel to a powder, and watching that transformation can be quite interesting.
Yeah, they were really great textures this time.
Yeah.
And just as you mentioned with the formulation workshop, it was exactly the same thing. You've got one ingredient, but you get two different textures, two different products with different skin feel. And that was a big focus this year.
Yeah, and that actually leads us on to the second trend, was this idea of transformational products. And obviously we've chatted a little bit about it, but let's just highlight some more of the ones that we found. I know that you chatted about the eyeshadow one, but I know there was some more that we had a look at. So this idea where it starts off as one thing and ends up as another.
Yes. For me, that was more about having either less water or waterless formulation, so to speak.
Okay.
Or those with low package or package free. And these were mainly things like, for example, a stick cleanser that when you apply, it starts foaming. So you've got a very compact little product, but when you apply it, it gives a very different feel. And that's not something you see a lot. Yeah, so we've got the jelly to cream. That was another one. So still the gel thing. What I also noticed, and it's probably just a bit of a crossover from what we were talking about, the textures, is that I saw a lot of food inspired products. There were some great names, and I quite like them because obviously food is something everyone can understand. So it was good for customers or consumers to understand what the product is. But for example, we saw silky jam or rasp jelly, or I also saw coffee shots, and they are all great skincare products, but I had a feeling that they are pretty much food inspired products. So from the textures and the transforming textures, this was another thing that was very apparent.
Did you see that as well, Lorraine? Food inspired?
I did, yes.
And we even have a photo. Yes?
Yes, exactly. I quite enjoyed that. I was walking around the sensory bar with Timi going, look, it's a pot of jam, stirring things up. And, they'd coloured their products as well. Now, I don't know if they were naturally coloured or not. You never quite know, because that's the problem. The one problem with in-cosmetics is no one ever puts up any of the inky names. So you literally have no idea what you're putting on your skin. And if anyone's listening, I would really like it if they could change that for future years, because as a formulator, you want to understand what the ingredients actually are. But a lot of them were coloured to look like food as well. And so, yeah, you often had the feeling you were stirring in a pot of jam, or you did have a shot of coffee, or you did have, some kale in a little bottle in front of you. So, Yeah, it was interesting to see, and I'm sure this will long continue. Of course, the issue with this is that the European cosmetics regulations don't let you market cosmetics to look like food. So there's a fine line that they're treading here, and I'm not entirely sure how many beauty brands are going to deal with this. But obviously for the ingredient suppliers, they don't worry about that too much because that's something that the end producer has to deal with.
It's an interesting point. I mean, I saw it as well. And obviously the food-inspired beauty relates back to the transformational kind of products, and then also relates back to the jelly-like textures, because all of the jams and the was it chutney that they called one a face chutney or something? I've got photos of it as well. Where
what a great idea!
I know, where they have the jelly-like looking products which kind of look like food. And I saw this at the Natural and Organic Products Show as well. So I attended that after In Cosmetics here in London. And there was a lot of beauty products that were made with food ingredients, so like potato and parsley. And we're definitely maybe using that boundary of how you would market something, quite well. And we saw that at that Mintel table, that kale shot, because it did look almost like you could drink it, but it wasn't. It was a shot for your face.
Yeah. But there were also many things that not just the actual product looked like food, or, you could just misunderstand the whole thing, but also they played with the names. Like I found products that were called body vinegar. It's great. And it was a great little toner for the body. But again, they went back to food to name their product. So yeah, it was very interesting. And again, as you said, these were quite one of those transformational products. I think the coffee shot was a foaming body scrub, which is again great.
I think I saw that one. Yeah, I think I saw that one. Yeah, I mean, I was fascinated by that whole thing because I love textures and I love, playing around with things. And then I love products that make you think. And those ones definitely do make you think, like a body vinegar. And that face chutney, I think it was like a face chutney. I was like, oh, wow, like what would this be like to use? And obviously Timi and I were talking about this yesterday, is that the other slight issue you have with In Cosmetics, and this is never going to change, it's just one of those things, is that you can't really use the products that are there because they've obviously been handled a lot by people. So sometimes you can put a tiny bit on your hand, but that jelly face mask with the bamboo spheres in it, I was like, I just want to put it on my face to see what it's like. But you can't do that because
no, then you'd be walking around the show. Yeah, and then you'd be going into the talks covered in face mask, gel dripping off your chin. It wouldn't be pretty, would it, Gemma? There's a thought.
Yeah. But it's incredibly interesting to go around and use all those things and just have a look at what is possible.
Yes, and those zones they set up are huge as well, and they seem to be getting bigger and bigger. So over the last 3 years, I've watched those sensory bars and formulation zones really grow in size, and they're a lot busier now as well because people want to go and try out all the textures.
Yeah.
And I mean, In Cosmetics in itself is absolutely enormous, so you will feel totally overwhelmed. But I would say, as a formulator, the one place you should always go is the sensory bar and spend some time there to see what people are making, because it's fascinating.
Yeah. Absolutely. And even if it's, not necessarily natural, and even if it's makeup and things that you might not necessarily be interested in formulating, it's still interesting to go and have a look at what people are playing with.
Absolutely. And you know what? I really want to see the natural and the indie sector actually take some inspiration from all of these trends, because I've talked about this a couple of times on our Instagram account too. We see all these gels, but I don't see that many indie brands making gels. Mm-hmm. And so the mainstream industry knows that gels are what everyone wants, particularly gel emulsions. And then the indie sector isn't quite keeping pace with that. So I really feel that indie brands should be looking at what the mainstream industry is doing and taking inspiration and making their own natural or green version, because there's so many opportunities out there.
Absolutely. So moving on to our next trend, and it's one that I'm hoping that you can chat us through, Lorraine, was the ubiquitous presence of the microbiome.
Yes. Well, microbiome is everywhere and it's obviously here to stay. We're not going to obviously turn this podcast into a whole explanation of the skin microbiome and how to formulate for it, but it's obvious that the industry is paying attention and is starting to make more and more ingredients that they feel will strengthen or protect or defend, or I've got some things written down here, all sorts of different claims that people are making. And so we saw ingredient suppliers sell prebiotics, probiotics, and even postbiotics. And I have to admit, I don't know what that means. So I'm going to go look that up after this and figure it out. But even I was just having a look at the in-cosmetics brochure. I've got it here in front of me at the technical seminars. And I'd say that there were a lot of technical seminars on. I'd say that probably a good 10 to 15% of all of those seminars were on the skin's microbiome. So that shows you how much attention is being given to just that topic alone. And I think we're going to see even more of this. Now, obviously, the microbiome is a huge topic. And, we know that the skin contains between 1 million and 1 billion microbes per square centimetre. So we live in harmony together with all these microbes on our skin. So obviously the industry is going to start paying more and more attention to that in the coming years and creating more ingredients that will help brands make microbiome claims. So I'm curious to see how much this will grow and where it will go when we attend in Barcelona next year, because who knows, maybe there'll be a microbiome zone for all we know.
Yeah. I mean, there's microbiome conferences already that are dedicated specifically to microbiome. And, a lot of the big players have announced significant amounts of money to go into funding more research on the microbiome, because it's not, very well understood yet. And the science is still forthcoming. And you can probably catch a further discussion on this in another podcast, because I interviewed Yasmina Aganovic from Mother Dirt, who have a microbiome brand, and she talks a little bit more about the science in that podcast episode. But yeah, microbiome is here to stay, I think.
Yes, exactly. And we'll see more and more ingredients come onto the market that can help you make microbiome claims. And sometimes that will be, just moisturization claims effectively, because a healthy skin has a healthy microbiome. But sometimes you may actually find that ingredient suppliers are starting to make ingredients that will strengthen the microbiome, that will maybe defend it a little bit more and help you make stronger microbiome claims for your formulations. So watch this space. I reckon if we're recording this in 3 years' time, that we'll be talking about this even more.
Right. So let's have a look at what we thought was our next trend. Oh, yeah. There was a big presence or a big showcasing of certifications in a way that I haven't seen it at the Amsterdam show, as well as showcasing of kind of niche ingredients, so certification for niche ingredients and niche sectors. So obviously
the niche compliant.
Yeah, the niche compliant.
Yeah, that's what.
Yeah. So just talking about Cosmos and EcoCert, there was a lot of people advertising that their ingredients were Cosmos and EcoCert approved in a very big way. People were showcasing that. I didn't see that so much at Amsterdam, but it was like a badge of honor almost, I felt this year. And then Timi, I was wondering if you just have a little chat about the kind of niche compliant ingredients as well, because that was showcased in a way that hasn't been before either.
No, that's what I noticed as well, that there were many ingredients with, as you said, Cosmos and EcoCert certification. But I also noticed that many suppliers paid attention to specifying niches that they could cater for. So, for example, I'm always particularly interested in those ingredients that have halal certification. And this year, I've seen that in many places where it was clearly displayed that this particular ingredient has halal certification or kosher certification or vegan certification. And, this opens a lot of doors to people who really want to focus on their own specific niches, whether, you are a formulator, a brand owner, or you want to supply ingredients. This opens a lot of doors. And this year, I think they focus on this a lot more.
Yeah. I would say so. Did you spot that as well, Lorraine, this year?
I did. I saw a lot of Cosmos labels. Yes. I have to admit, I wasn't specifically looking for certification, so it wasn't something I was paying a huge amount of attention to, but I did see the Cosmos logo come back a lot. And I would say that because of this natural trend that people are wanting to buy more natural ingredients, that they then want to have the certification to back up their claims. And so I suppose most ingredient suppliers think that the easiest way of doing that is to just become certified. And that then ticks the box, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I guess like Timi was saying with the niche ingredients, like if you can, talking about vegan beauty, that's moving in a big way. People are getting more and more interested in that. And if the ingredients are already compliant, you can show that already. Then if a brand wants to go on to get vegan certification themselves, it's going to be a lot easier working with those ingredients, working with those suppliers, working with the manufacturers. Everything you'd already have paperwork, you'd already have the background to go ahead with the certification that you might want to go ahead with. So that was quite interesting because they're obviously thinking about it from an ease of use perspective.
So a brand is ready to go effectively when they receive the ingredient.
Yeah. So that was showcased in quite a big way. Moving on to the next one, we noticed quite a lot to do with water this year, and this comes at kind of from a few different angles. Let's first talk about this idea of waterless beauty, Lorraine. Or
one of my favorite topics.
Contain minimal water and that kind of idea, because I noticed that came up a few times in cosmetics.
It did. And walking around, I saw quite a few claims for low water formulations, reduced water formulations, or even waterless formulations. This is a bit of a bugbear for me at the moment. I'm really quite unhappy about the fact that people are talking about waterless beauty because, of course, every single product has a water footprint. So what we're starting to see is that people are making these claims, but they're not necessarily backing them up with sustainable data. Because of course, if you're making an anhydrous product like a facial oil, then it still is using water at some point along the supply chain to be shipped, to be, for those ingredients to be grown, packaging, everything has a water footprint. So basically what we're seeing is that people are claiming that their products are waterless, whereas in fact, they're probably using thousands of tons of water just to produce that single product that goes on the shelf. So that's having a knock-on effect in what we're seeing in terms of claims, because people are talking about then reduced water, low water, and what they're implying with those claims is that their products are more sustainable. Whereas, of course, actually, as I just said, every single product uses water, regardless of whether there's actually water in the formulation or not. So I get quite worked up about this topic. We published a blog post on it. I put something on LinkedIn about it, which has been very popular. And I really want people to start questioning what they're saying when they talk about water, because, ultimately every single one of your beauty products will have a water footprint.
Absolutely. And then Timi, I was wondering if we could just comment about this other aspect related to the water kind of side of things in cosmetics, was that there was a lot of products that were there that were saying activated by water.
Exactly. So as I said before, there were many that said either low water or no water containing products. But also this would fit into the category of no packaging or low packaging products. And I'm talking mainly about solid formulations such as an exfoliating bar or a conditioner bar. All of these would need water to be activated. So it's not when let's just say we're talking about a lotion bar that you just apply on the skin without any water. But these products are solid formulations, as in bar looking like a bar formulation. But you still need to apply water on them or with them to activate the product. And there were many of these. Lots of sticks, whether it's a facial cleansing stick or there was this really fun looking exfoliating stick with little dots in the actual stick. And as you apply it with water, it exfoliates at the same time. So it's not the whole product was an exfoliator, but just certain bits in the product. So there were many of these. And in a way, it's a good thing because obviously then you are talking about either the no packaging or the low packaging option. And as a formulator, it also helps with the shelf life of the product. But at the same time, as Lorraine said, you will need water to use them and to activate them.
Yeah, absolutely.
So even then it's maybe it's water less or without water in the formula, but you won't be able to use these without water.
Yeah, absolutely. So moving on from that, I don't know if this is a trend as such, but it's something that we highlighted last year and something that we saw again this year. And that was that there is quite a high level of greenwashing that tends to happen at these shows. So we highlighted it at Amsterdam because we felt that when we talked to quite a few store holders, when they'd advertised that they had a sustainable product or that this was a natural and sustainable product, when you asked them how it was harvested or how it was grown or how it was processed, there wasn't that much information to back up why it was a sustainable product. And there seemed to have been almost a linking of, because this is a natural product, it is sustainable, when actually, obviously, we know that quite often is not true. So I know, again, Lorraine, for you, this is a particularly
over to you, Lorraine.
anger-inspiring topic. But let's just talk about how greenwashing kind of emerged at the Paris show 2019.
Okay, I'll try and stay calm because this always makes me really annoyed. I saw it in quite a few different ways, and this isn't going to go away anytime soon. And even talking to the other Formula Botanica students and graduates at the show, they were also saying that sometimes they would go to stalls and they would scratch the surface and the whole story would just fall apart straight away. And I think this is in part why some suppliers are often reluctant to put inky names on the ingredients that they're selling in such a public forum, because they realize someone's going to come up to them and instantly go, well, you've preserved that botanical extract with phenoxyethanol, so of course it's not natural. But, so there's quite a bit of greenwashing going on. What I saw was twofold. I went to the sustainability corner with Timi on the last day, and we just wandered through it and had a look, and I can spot sustainability BS at quite a distance. And there were some really interesting products in there, some really interesting ingredients. And there was also just a lot of stuff that just didn't mean anything. It was a lot of hot air. For instance, to give you an example, I think I saw 2 ingredients in there that were listed in the sustainability corner because they use blockchain technology, which means that they can encrypt the data that's coming out of, I think, the communities where the ingredients are being produced. Well, that's all very nice, and I'm sure that has a lot of benefits for the industry, but I wouldn't exactly call that sustainable. So I think there were a few tenuous links there as to what makes a sustainable product. The other thing we saw was this sub-zero waste thing. I'm not going to call it a trend because it's not a trend. It was called a movement. It's not that either. It's just a load of greenwashing. And we're going to be putting out some more information on this in the coming months. So what we saw was that people were saying, okay, we're not talking about zero waste. We're talking about sub-zero waste. What does that even mean? I mean, it's assuming that we've already achieved zero waste, which of course we haven't because the planet is drowning in plastic, and that we've somehow gone beyond zero waste where, we're putting resources back into the planet, which is, that's what sub-zero waste implies. And we saw this on one particular trend table, and I won't name any names, but, when we actually scratched the surface and said, what does this mean? They said, well, it means to us that they're a sustainable product. I had one particular example where I was holding up this plastic container in an outer cardboard box, which is very standard in the cosmetics industry, and it was listed as a sub-zero product. And I said, well, first of all, it's in plastic. Secondly, it's got an outer packaging box with it. How is this sub-zero? And the answer I got was, well, they're giving back to communities. And I said, well, those two things are fundamentally different. You can't say that your waste has anything to do with your community engagement. I saw another one which it was even worse. It was a makeup container. It was non-recyclable plastic. It had a little plastic applicator in it, which was also wrapped in plastic and had a further outer packaging box that went with it. And that was also called Sub-Zero. And then when I looked at why it was called Sub-Zero, they said it was because they donated to conservation charities. I thought, well, hang on a minute. You're effectively saying that someone can give money to charity and that makes them a sub-zero waste product? There is no logic here. I don't know who came up with this concept, but they clearly don't understand what sustainable development means. And I think that sits at the crux of a lot of the greenwashing that we're seeing. So I got quite annoyed by that, as you can tell.
Yeah, I think in that case, I feel that people who had come up with that hadn't really understood the concept of what the ethical consumer is, because I think what had happened is a lot of these products were labeled to sub-zero waste, but also this will appeal to an ethical consumer. And what they've done almost is had a look at things that people might consider ethical and put them in silos almost. So people like it when people give back to communities. People like it when people source ingredients from have a very short supply chain, or are sourcing directly from a farmer, or who are supporting conservation charities, or who are, I don't know, doing something with their packaging. Because there were a couple of products on display that were trying to do something innovative with packaging. I mean, didn't quite meet my requirements for sustainability, but they were trying. Okay, there was an element of effort, but I guess the idea is that those things exist separately. Whereas an ethical consumer, I think, if you're looking at it from a millennial and a Gen Z perspective, is looking for far more than that. They're not looking for these things existing alone. They're looking for the whole package. And I think to list those things as sub-zero waste is misleading.
Yeah. And what I'm worried about is that some of these ingredient suppliers will start to latch onto this and tell beauty brands that they can use their ingredients and be sub-zero waste, and that this is somehow going to gain traction in the industry, and that people will start to talk about it and effectively hijack such an important concept of waste management and sustainability that it'll be lost. So I'm a little bit concerned about that. And I hope we can start to get the message out there that actually we need to reframe what sustainable development means in relation to the beauty industry. But that's a bigger chunk of work than we're going to cover in our podcast today, yes, I think.
Absolutely. So yeah, greenwashing, unfortunately, still around. And like Lorraine said, I don't think that's going to change anytime soon due to confusion about sustainable development. But moving on from that, because that could dominate the entire podcast. My next trend that I had listed was the idea of simplicity formulating. So I noticed that there were, especially in the innovation zone and the formulation zone, what was the zone called? It was innovation and
sensory bar.
Was that there were a lot of suppliers advertising formulations and products that only had, say, 3 ingredients. It only has X inky names. It only has 3 or 4 ingredients. You can make this with 3 or 4 ingredients. Whereas before, I think there was a desire to have as many possible ingredients listed on your bottle or packaging. It seemed to have shifted over to this idea that you could have less and still have more in a product. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
No, I noticed that too, actually. I saw quite a few areas talk about the number of ingredients you can use. And what was interesting was I also noticed that there were fewer exotic botanical ingredients advertised this year, which I was actually quite pleased to see. This was even something I brought up in my talk. It's always about the newest and fanciest and most exotic ingredient you can include in your formulation, rather than what's local to me. Where can I reduce my beauty miles? Where can I actually reduce my carbon footprint? And so I think there was a greater focus on functional ingredients this year rather than rare botanicals. And yeah, I was delighted to see that, because this fits in perfectly with our teachings at Formula Botanica, where, we always say less is more. And I think that one sustainability message was getting out a lot more, that less ingredients, less usage of the product is better for the planet, basically. And I hope to see more of that, because ultimately, the fewer ingredients you use, the more potency they have in your formulation. And well, this fits perfectly with our ethos at Formula Botanica, doesn't it, Timi?
Yeah, completely. Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting because you saw that at the Natural and Organic Product Show as well. People tended to be moving towards things like potato, I mentioned, and potato has obviously been used for, thousands of years. Parsley, things that were sort of less exotic and more accessible. Yeah, exactly. That's a really good word. Accessible. Everything just felt a little bit more accessible in that way. And yeah, whereas the Amsterdam show, there was a lot of big stands with these really beautiful imagery showcasing these big trees that grew all these types of fruits, and then, would educate you about the type of fruit that they were talking about. There seemed to be slightly less of that. And like you say, there's more focus on simplicity and functionality.
And this fits well with the indie trend as well. because we're starting to see, well, indie brands obviously have always gone for greater potency. There's less focus on maximizing profit margins to the absolute limit by using cheaper functional ingredients and a lot more water. There's always been more focus on using the right ingredients that have greater efficacy in higher percentages, oils, butters, hydrosols, that sort of thing. So using fewer ingredients will have greater potency. And I think this fits in well with what indie brands are doing, which is possibly why there was this greater shift towards simplicity formulating, because perhaps the mainstream industry is paying attention to what indie brands are doing.
Which moves me nice and swiftly onto my next point, which is indie beauty has gone mainstream.
Yes. And aren't we glad about that point?
Yeah, I think you could see that in the show this year in the fact that what Timi and I were talked about earlier was you had your indie beauty trail. Mm-hmm. And like Timi said, you couldn't get hold of those brochures for love nor money. And when the show started, that was detailing that trade, people went mental for that idea of the indie beauty trail. Like Timi said, suppliers were more willing to engage. The minimum order quantities were changing, right? Yep. And it seemed like there were way more indie beauty brands just there. I mean, we obviously were on the ground with our students and the people that they brought with them. So that was interesting. We also, I felt, saw more talks in the marketing trends 10 that focus on natural and indie beauty.
And the other thing I picked up on, which I got as feedback from our students and graduates, because there were a lot of them there must have been at least 50 that we saw. And of course, we didn't even see everyone. So Formula Botanica was taking over. Well, obviously there were 9,000 people there, so 50 is a drop in the ocean, but we were still taking over. The one thing I got back from them was they were saying that so many more suppliers were willing to speak to them about lower minimum order quantities. And one person even said that they would approach a store and they'd say, right, the minimum order quantity is 100 kilos. And then they'd go, well, I'm an indie brand. They'd go, oh, okay, we can give it to you in 2.5 kilo packs. Instantly, they would change. And that is such a revelation because, as Timi said earlier, we've had some quite uncomfortable conversations with suppliers in cosmetics over the years where they almost sort of get the broom out to chase you off the store. Like, you're not going to buy in 25 kilo pallets. Get out of my view. Don't stand in front of me anymore. So it was very interesting to see that complete shift. And, who knows, maybe in years to come, they'll have an indie beauty zone at In Cosmetics. Is my next prediction for the future.
I think it's also great because I was thinking about this when we get all these questions from students in the online classroom, like how can I source this ingredient? How can I upscale my production? And, I have to look at these issues from two sides. One, I'm a formulator. Second, we are an educational establishment. As an educational establishment, we encourage people to experiment, to try out new things. But when I look at things as a formulator, I kind of feel that if I cannot source that ingredient, what is the point of trying? So it's like whether you could get an ingredient in small amount or you can only get the ingredient in 25 kilos. As a formulator, you are kind of torn because do I want to try, let's just say, that extract if I know I will never be able to source it? I will not be able to source it to launch my brand. But then why waste my time exploring it? And as an educator, we would say, yeah, try it, explore it, because you don't know. So I think this year in Cosmetics, because there was this bridge between mainstream and indie brands, suddenly this problem is kind of eliminated because you can source these ingredients in accessible amounts, in amounts that you can handle.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the thing I would say off the back of that is if you're an indie beauty formulator, you need to be attending these shows.
Absolutely.
I mean, Timi started off talking about why you need to be there, but just to reinforce this point again, this is your opportunity to speak directly to suppliers. And you need to start thinking about where you're going to get your ingredients from in the future and what your supply chain is going to look like. So if you're not attending these shows, you're missing out on valuable opportunities because who knows what sort of contacts you'll make. So make sure that you start to attend shows such as In Cosmetics, which are all over the world. You don't have to go to the ones in Europe. There's ones in North America, South America, all over Asia. get yourself to one of these shows and start networking, because it will benefit your brand in the long run.
Absolutely. I completely agree. Even shows like Professional Beauty are really interesting to go and have a look around as well, to see what people are putting out. And I always say to people, if you are a natural and organic formulator, that's fine, but don't pigeonhole yourselves solely into the shows that showcase naturals. It's really interesting to go and have a look at what the industry is doing as a whole, because it will give you some context as to what is happening at that moment and how indie beauty or natural organic formulating or green beauty movement, however you want to use the term, fits into that, or how we are influencing other markets. So it can give you all of these shows can give you some really interesting and helpful information, and will really start your imagination going. That's what I found. I mean, after every day in cosmetics, for me, it was like, oh, what about this? And I saw this, and
Yes. Now, not everyone looks at these shows in that way. So some people will turn up and they'll feel so overwhelmed that they'll just be paralyzed by it. And so I did talk to one student who said that they felt that way. They arrived and they just looked at it, because you're talking, like several aircraft hangars full of stands. That's how it comes across. And you just feel like you'll never see all of it, and you won't. So one of our students said that the first thing they did as they arrived was she posted up in our online classroom and said, I'm at In Cosmetics. Is anyone else here? Do you want to join up with me? And someone instantly said, I've just arrived. I want to walk around with you. And so they got to know each other, instantly became friends, and are going to keep in touch. But they also managed to explore the show together that way. So it's often good to buddy up with someone. And if you're at Formula Botanica, obviously there will always be students at these shows who you can do that with.
Absolutely. Right. I want to talk about one final thing that actually I didn't list in our trends initially, but I think it warrants talking about, because it is such a trend in the cosmetics industry as a whole, and that is CBD.
Yes.
Now, I didn't feel it had a massive presence at In Cosmetics, if I'm honest.
Not as big as I would have expected, no.
There was hemp-derived emulsifiers being shown, and obviously that's different from anything that CBD offers. Hemp and CBD are quite different. But it didn't seem, there didn't seem to be that many stalls showcasing that for me. And I thought there would be more.
I agree with you.
When I attended the other cosmetic shows recently, so Professional Beauty, Natural and Organic Products Show, that was out in a big way.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the In Cosmetics magazine here as well, because I didn't pick up on many either. I think I saw maybe 2 stalls in total. And as I said, when you're talking several aircraft hangars full of stalls, only 2 of them, and there were probably more because obviously I didn't see everything, but it's not that much in the grand scheme of things.
No, I was surprised by that, if I'm honest.
I wonder if maybe this is a trend that's coming from the indie industry that the mainstream just hasn't quite picked up on yet. Also, I wonder whether regulatory issues might be getting in the way there.
I completely agree. I think there's a crossover here. I think, CBD and hemp, cannabis, all of that whole family has always been seen as, it's been associated with a certain movement, and obviously it has a political issues attached to it as well. So I think, first of all, that can be an issue, the regulatory environment, and how people perceive it as well, as free to use, legal to use. Do I want to use it, especially when it's been criminalized, and people think there's quite a polarity and opinion about CBD, about cannabis, about all those sort of things. Secondly, I think there is still a confusion about the science and the safety of use, and especially particularly science in relating to how CBD works on the skin. There doesn't seem to be lots and lots and lots of science to refer to yet. Obviously, it's focusing on ingestibles at the moment. That's where it seems to be. The science that is available seems to focus on what happens when you ingest it and how the endocannabinoid system works with ingestion, rather than the skin. And obviously the skin does have an endocannabinoid system. It's an organ, but how that works seems to be sort of not quite, people aren't quite sure, I think. So that's why we've seen less of it, I think, in cosmetics.
You could say the same for the microbiome. Mm-hmm. There isn't a huge amount of data to really back up that making a product with prebiotics or probiotics or postbiotics, whatever they are, has a profound effect on the skin, but that isn't stopping the movement. So I do wonder whether there is still a piece of work for the mainstream industry to do here, or maybe it doesn't really fit in with mainstream brands that well. I mean, what did you see at the Natural and Organic Products Show?
Well, there was a lot of ingestibles and a lot of infused products there. So brands seem to have been, incorporating that 360-degree aspect of health. So that you would, ingest something and obviously treat your inner beauty as much as you would treat your outer beauty. And that concept was quite noticeable amongst everything at the Natural and Organic Product Show. The indie beauty, the smaller brands seem to have captured that quite nicely and can understand that, and how customers might understand that concept as well. People are very interested in how their internal system is functioning, not just how their external system is functioning. And actually, while we're talking about this, Timi, you attended the marketing trends. Presentation on emotional skincare.
Yes, that was a great presentation. It was one of the first one. I completely forgot about it, and then suddenly, I've got this Mintel talk to attend to. Yes, it was very interesting because they talked about emotional beauty, and in my head, emotional beauty is something very different. Here, basically, the whole point was about how those people feel who have compromised skin, and how it affects them mentally and emotionally, and what brands can do to help with that. And one of the key things I picked up on was how it's recommended, how those people who were asked about it admitted that they didn't really understand the labeling on certain products. So how important it is for brand owners to label their products properly, how important it is to educate their customers, especially if your niche is for those with compromised skin, whether it's eczema or psoriasis or anything like that, that you educate your customers on how to use your products that you are selling. Another thing was what they call the 360-degree beauty. And that is, as I mentioned, not just skincare, but also emotional and mental health. Yes. And that is something big. And I think there will be loads of focus on that in the future. They mentioned some great ingredients, as we talked about it yesterday. I don't even know how to pronounce some of them. Well, I haven't heard of them. But they mentioned some interesting ones, such as matcha tea or matcha powder, moringa, turmeric. So there were quite a few ingredients that, and they mentioned hemp and CBD in that talk, how that could help those people with compromised skin.
And I think this is what we saw at the Natural and Organic Product Show, is that you had this idea already embraced by the indie beauty community. They're already talking about the ideas of the emotional connection, how you're feeling. It's not just about what you put on, it's about what you put in. So there was quite a lot of stands, like turmeric is quite a good example, where you would have ingestible turmeric, but also say turmeric infused face mask, or so that idea was very, very well communicated, I felt, already by the indie beauty community.
I think, for us, or for me, for example, because I've never had any issues with my skin, luckily, I find it difficult to imagine what it must be like. But another data showed that many people feel beautiful just because they feel confident, or they've got a nice skin, not because they put on makeup and that makes them feel beautiful. It's more about the emotional and the mental balance that would make them feel beautiful, and how skincare brands can help achieve that.
Yeah.
And that fits perfectly with our overall philosophy, which is that natural beauty isn't just about beauty, it's also about well-being.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Right, I think we covered everything that I wanted to cover. Any parting thoughts from either of you?
Yes, get yourself to In-Cosmetics in Barcelona next year if you're in Europe. If you're not in Europe, well, even if you're not in Europe, you can still get to Barcelona possibly. But if you're not, then go to one of the other events that they host worldwide, because it is worthwhile attending just to go and see what everyone's talking about. And if you're not there, then you're missing out. So hope to see you all in Barcelona next year, because we'll be walking around again as usual and hopefully reporting back afterwards.
Yep. No, but seriously, I was a bit, not nervous, but a bit, what can I expect? And it was a great surprise. And I made great connections. I had good chats and I learned a lot. So you just have to go and see it for yourself. And I never forget, Lorraine once told me that it doesn't matter if it's synthetic or not, the better the devil you know. So you always pick up something new, or it just gives you inspiration.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you both for being wonderful guests and for joining me to talk all about this. And yeah, I hope everyone enjoys it. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you so much for joining us on this podcast. As usual, I hope you found it entertaining and useful to you. If you want to connect with Formula Botanica in any way, then you can head over to our website, formulabotanica.com. You can also find us on social media, Facebook, Twitter and Instagram at Formula Botanica. And if you wish to join in the global green beauty conversation, then please head over to our free Facebook group, the Skincare Entrepreneur Mastermind. Have a great day. Thanks for listening.